This evening we're going to talk briefly about the current event regarding the United States Supreme Court, the Dodd case which has overturned Roe v. Wade. While this is not really our primary purpose, it may serve indeed to elucidate the teaching, the way that we hold and profess. We first have to understand the idea of rights. Now, a right can be understood as a permission, and along with rights often goes a prohibition. And so I think we can all relate to this and understand, perhaps just with a simple story. Say a child is going outside from the house, and his parent says, well, to the young child, you may play right here in this area, but don't go into the street. This is the little area, and you can play there. Now the child has a right now to play in this area, and also a prohibition. He cannot go further, like into the street. So we have to grasp a very simple concept, that when one is considering rights of man, that the lineage, the antecedent, so to speak, of the originality or the original creation of the right is a sort of a chain from the child to the parent, and who gave the parent authority, and so on, and it regresses. Now, as I said, oftentimes also a prohibition. In other words, it is assumed that the exterior authority obtained the ability and authority themselves to give the right to others. So now we consider the political regime, and regardless of the structure of the political regime, whether it be a democracy, a tomocracy, some sort of representative parliamentary procedure, a dictatorship. In the political world of man, the regime will in some way establish rules of law and the dispensation of rights and prohibitions. So recently, in this case, the Dodd case, evidently, we have not only moved from the federal to the state level, which is really not as important as it seems, because we want to go to the root of the ability of the government to make these decisions. It is not mere lawmaking or interpretation of what is authorized by the regime. For this case deals with something which touches upon our teaching. But first you have to understand that rights obtained from someone else. In other words, when it is in the realm of man, the subjective world of man. So men may say they have a right to do something. I have a right to, as I said, to go somewhere, or I am prohibited to do something. So there's a positive and a negative aspect of rights and prohibitions. So where is the authority of man? Each regime may or may not trace it back to some sort of an original parent. In the modern world, dominated as it is in the West by a modern Christianity, the implicit or the underlying assumption is that the original parent or parents had the rights, and which are then conferred through the regime. Or we can say the regime finds the right in its own collective ability from other men, an agreement, a consent. In other words, if you go to Locke, you will see that man enters into the assumption is in the West from John Locke that the social contract is established, one gives up certain rights, and in return the government provides certain other rights. In our teaching, in our way, we hold, though, that this is in the subjective world of man, an abstraction. And we hold also that nature is another world, a world which man only dimly understands. And in fact, his reality, man's reality, the subjective world of man, is but a reprojection from man onto the screen of the reality of nature. In a way, man lives in a sort of a virtual, created reality, created by his mind and projected upon reality in which he then senses from a projected screen, behind which is nature. If we then look at rights of reproduction in the arena of man, we see a political effort to derive the authority to have or have not a right or a prohibition with regard to reproduction, abortion. Coming really from the Christian influence on the legalities of the case. While not directly spoken of, the underlying authority seems not to be from the consent necessarily of man alone, but to say that it reaches back all the way to the parent, original parents, perhaps Adam and Eve, and then from God. And that the life then of the unborn fetus is a life which is created by God, and therefore the state then, in carrying out a religious goal, intrudes upon the child rearing in order to safeguard the life which comes from God to the parent. So the political framework is that either rights come from merely the consent of a group, say 10 people in a boat, for an example of a pure democracy, and the majority decides that there's a particular right to have a certain amount of water per day. Well, that right then derives strictly from agreement of men, subjective. However, in this instance, in the Dodd case, the religious tone of it is that it is of more importance, and the very core reason is to have the state as an instrument of a religious interpretation to save the life which is said to begin at a beginning point. And though in the womb is a person. So in the world of man, the world of law, the world of politics, the regime has reached into a religion, as it were, an implicit Christian religion, and found the necessity to overturn a case which has itself establishing an implicit right of privacy, and that the state may not go too far, and that the person bearing the child has the responsibility to decide whether or not to have the unborn child. Our way, always, is to say that man's world is inferior to the world of nature. Nature is our objective reality. And we are not Christians. We do not hold that a person comes from a soul elsewhere in heaven and comes down into a body in sort of a duality. We hold that the living organic body is a unity, or should be if one becomes fully human. In the ancient way, the ancient gods, that man is a unity of three: body, a mental, and a spiritual will, but not separate, all in a unity. Where then do rights obtain from nature? Well, they come from what the animal or the human is innately. And we hold that natural rights are superior to man's artificial, subjectively created, man-made rights. Now, if we look to nature as our guide, we can see many instances, a spectrum of reproduction. All of the animals and all of the creatures love their children, but abortion is often either happens by circumstance or by some other spontaneity or spontaneous. In other words, the life in nature, the creation of life, is not some linear, always creating life, but it is a cycle of life and death, where death is not feared, and death is part of the creation of life. But going back to rights, natural rights. Another simple example, let us take an animal, a bird, a hawk, a cat, a wolf, a wild horse, thoroughbred horse, even those that have been modified by genetic selection. Animals are what they are. Their being level in the work, in the fourth way we speak of being, is fully higher than man. Man currently is less truly than human, less than his potential, because he is fractioned, he is in disunity. But animals are inherently, unless they are abused by man, they are in unity. So their rights come not from an agreement with others, but from their innate being. So they have natural rights. They have natural rights. In the Dodd case, when the political regime begins to move toward making the decision, rights or prohibitions of what happens internally in the body of man, and by man I mean all of us, all of the spectrum of man, woman, in between, all races, man, all of us. When any government begins to claim the authority to judge whether or not there may be right, permission, or prohibition at the boundary of the body, then it transgresses into the world of nature. Then it goes too far. And we hold that this is wrong. that it is natural right, which is superior to man-made right. And the natural right of animals and man is that the living organic flesh, the body organic, belongs to the animal, belongs to the man. And as I said, by man I mean all men, women, in between, all sexualities. No government has the right to say what you as a person can or cannot do within your body. If it does, if it claims this right, it enslaves you, does it not? Because what is a slave but an instrument whose will is another's? You follow this? Do you follow? The Christian impetus on this case cannot be overlooked. It is plain. How long have the Christian religions warred on nature? Their whole being is that nature is evil, a decaying. They look upon death as a war, and they want to have victory over death. We fear no death. We believe life and death are the same flowing of the creation from the earth and the sun and the soil and the blood, and we become living, and our life force comes from the earth, not from some fictitious God elsewhere in some non-existent heaven. We are in heaven. We hold that our highest calling, the highest calling of man, is to protect nature, so that when a political regime, by its legal apparatus, comes to proclaim whether reproduction may or may not occur, it transgresses into the body. Well then, if that can be done by the courts, they can not only grant rights but prohibitions. They here prohibit that the person with their own body can do something to the child that is inside them. But the child is part of them in the body. Now, of course, if the child is past quickening, then and nearing being able to be outside, but before, just as in nature, when you look at nature, that nature has there is no evil in when you see in nature that an animal may have children and that all of the children do not live, or that there is some spontaneous abortion which occurs. It's part of nature. Anyone who has lived in farming or ranching and farming animals and caring for animals, you know how difficult it is to raise and not all live. Nature knows this, because nature does not believe death. Death is part of nature. We do not fear death because we believe that the life force from the earth herself is an eternal living force. And all creatures, including man, are extruded into forms from the soul stuff of what the goddess earth is. And the great God's Son, the ancient way, is the ancient gods of the Romans and the Greeks. But Christianity wars against this and has always warred against paganism. And the war continues today, does it not, in this case? What then after the government says, oh, it shall be decided by your political regime whether or not you have an abortion or not? It is that it is not whether or not it can occur, but how they claim the authority to decide. They should not be able to decide one way or the other, neither give right nor give prohibition. Can a political regime force you to take things into your body Can it tell you what you may eat? What you may breathe and not breathe? What you may see? What you may think and not think? You say, well, thoughts are different. Are they? Your thoughts are within your body, your organic brain. How far can this go? And it's an Orwellian dystopian future, but the beginnings of it comes from a religious impetus to give the state, as an instrument of the religious, the ability to claim right and prohibition of what goes on in your body. And your body is nature. Your body is nature. So your rights are natural rights, not man-made rights. Fear this. Fear this transgression of the political, for it violates everything we hold as a conviction we believe in, as our belief in the gods and the belief in the earth and the wonderful living blood, the living flesh, all living creatures and living animals. But doesn't man war on animals? Wars on animals continuously. Pesticide with the insects. It kills everything it comes into contact. Factory farming. So is it any wonder if the political regime embraces this and sees no sacredness in the natural? Is it any wonder that it then says, no, to the body of man, a physical body, you have no right to do this or that in your body. We, the state, will decide. No, it must not be that way. So, perhaps we rant and rave, but it is an offense. In our system, it is an offense when the natural is enslaved by a political regime. Free thought, the body is what we believe is sacred. Nature, the earth, the living blood, the sun, the air. And man should serve and protect those, and man must serve and protect his own body. No regime, no matter with well-meaning, regardless of its structural qualities, monarchy, democracy, aristocracy, oligarchy, whatever, but is not the current condition of our politics only a way to allow government, and indeed government and economics, to come into the body and say to man, we have the right to tell you and prohibit you or give you the permission to do this or that within your body. And in our way, we cannot hold to this. And this is why we speak tonight. So, forgive me, my friends, if I seem to be too strident. But it is very important that we understand that nature gives us the right of free thought, gives us the right to our life and our liberty, and that does not come from the consent of men or the agreement of judges. Let them stay within their sphere and go no further past the body, the temple of the body. All right. So endeth the lecture tonight. Great is the passing of God, the great God's Son, the wonderful Goddess Earth. God cleanseth the world with his passing. Let us do thy will of nature, not our own. Thy will, not our own. So, good night. Till next time.